in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. It's the 5th of April, 2014. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur Radio Event. How you doing, everybody? If you go to UCY.tv, mouse over shows, you will see a lot of people making radio there. And if you click on any of them, you end up on a page which also has a chat room. And some people have already done that. You're already there. So welcome Banjoy, D, Joe, Top Knot. Hey buddy, you were in there for a long time. Probably AFK by now. Vincent, what's up? Listener, Iota, and a couple of Anons. Welcome everybody. So, there's 3 possible topics for today, and I was gonna ask the people in the chat what they want to hear. I have open 2025 global governance. I have open the symbols, sex and the stars. That's the short title. That's about mythology by Ernest Busenbark. Alright, it's an outline of origins of moon and sun worship. Actually, it is the full title. I'm confusing this with another book. The origins of moon and sun worship, astrology, sex symbolism, mystic meaning of numbers, the Kabbalah, many popular customs, myths, superstitions, and religious beliefs. Alright, so that's a possibility. It has a foreword by Jordan Maxwell. I'm not sure what to think of him. I've heard him speak a couple of times, and it's astonishing to me that he's a Christian. At least that's what I heard him say last time. Yet he thinks that we are some kind of hybrid ET extraterrestrial business as humankind. So that's kind of strange, isn't it? I don't agree with that at all. I mean, it seems much more logical to me that humans, as every other life form here on Earth, came from the Earth. It's much more easy. Yeah. You know, this DNA, it's been running wild. It's been creating more and more sophisticated and complicated life forms. And we're just one of those, you see. There's no need for an ET, as far as I'm concerned. And I have open a chapter from Tragedy and Hope concerning Bolsheviks. So those are the three. Global governance, mythology, kinda like, and tragedy and hope, with a chapter 24 on Bolshevism. So what do you guys want to hear? And then we'll get into that. I've already got one voice for Bolshevism. So if you guys don't speak up, then that's what it's gonna be. I'm your host, Solvinur. I made that name up long before I started doing research and quote unquote woke up, as opposed to being asleep. And the word Solvinur, it's made of two words, Sol and Vinur. It's Icelandic. And it means Sol means sun, and Vinur means friend. Alright, let's get into the tragedy and hope, because I already got two voices for that. So let's do this. The corruption, incompetence and oppression of the Tsarist regime was forgotten at the outbreak of war in 1914, as most Russians, even those who were sent into battle with inadequate training and inadequate weapons, rallied to the cause of Holy Mother Russia in an outburst of patriotism. Yeah, we'll get into that, Vince, if this chapter won't fill 2 hours, and I doubt it will. But we'll see. Disloyalty survived the early disasters of 1914 and 1915 and was able to rally sufficiently to support the Great Brusilov offensive against Austria in 1916. But the tremendous losses of men and supplies in this endless warfare, the growing recognition of the complete incompetence and corruption of the government, and the growing rumors of the pernicious influence of the Tsarina and Rasputin over the Tsar, served to destroy any taste the Russian masses might have had for the war. This weakening of morale was accelerated by the severe winter and semi-starvation of 1916-1917. See, the important word here is morale. Yeah, like morals. You know, that's what it is. It's a military term, guys. Continuing. Public discontent showed itself in March 1917, when strikes and rioting began in Petrograd. Troops in the capital refused to suppress this agitation, and the government soon found itself to be helpless. When it tried to dissolve the Duma, that body refused to be intimidated and formed a provisional government under Prince Lvov. If I pronounce that correctly. It says Lvov. In this new regime, there was only one socialist, Minister of Justice Alexander Kerensky. Need to scroll here. Although the new government forced the abdication of the Tsar, recognized the independence of Finland and Poland, and established a full system of civil liberties, it postponed the fundamental social and economic changes until the establishment of a future constituent assembly. And it made every effort to continue the war. In this way, it failed to satisfy the desires of large numbers of Russians for land, bread, and peace. Powerful public feeling against efforts to continue the war forced the resignation of several of the more moderate members of the government, including Prince Lvov, who was replaced by Kerensky. The more radical socialist had been released from prison or had returned from exile, in some cases, such as Lenin, by German assistance. Their agitation for peace and land won adherents from a much wider group than their own supporters, and especially among the peasantry, who were very remote from socialist sympathies or ideas, but were insisting on an end to war and a more equitable system of land ownership. In St. Petersburg and Moscow and a few other cities, assemblies of workers, soldiers, peasants, called Soviets, were formed by the more radical socialists in opposition to the provisional government. Soviet seems to mean, and I'm not an expert on Russian, but I got this from Alan Watt. It seems to mean ruled by council. Soviet, okay? The Bolshevik group, under Lenin leadership, put on a powerful propaganda campaign to replace the provisional government by a nationwide system of Soviets and to adopt an immediate program of peace and land distribution. Hey Lady Pitbull, welcome. It cannot be said that the Bolshevik group won many converts or increased in size very rapidly, but their constant agitation did serve to neutralize or alienate support for the provisional government, especially among the soldiers of the two chief cities. On November 7th, 1917, the Bolshevik group seized the center of government in St. Petersburg and was able to hold them because of the refusal of the local military contingents to support the provisional government. Within 24 hours, this revolutionary group issued a series of decrees which abolished the provisional government, ordered the transfer of all public authority in Russia to Soviets of workers, soldiers, peasants, and set up a central executive of the Bolshevik leaders, called the Council of People's Commissars. And ordered the end of the war with Germany and the distribution of large land holdings to the peasants. The Bolsheviks had no illusion about their position in Russia at the end of 1917. They knew that they formed an infinitesimal group in that vast country, and that they had been able to seize power because they were a decisive and ruthless minority among a great mass of persons who had been neutralized by propaganda. There was considerable doubt about how long this neutralized condition would continue. Moreover, the Bolsheviks were convinced, in obedience to Marxist theory, that no real socialist system could be set up in a country as industrially backward as Russia. And finally, there was grave doubt if the Western powers would stand idly by and permit the Bolsheviks to take Russia out of the war or attempt to establish a socialist economic system. To the Bolshevik it seemed to be quite clear that they must simply try to survive on a day-to-day basis, hope to keep the great mass of Russians neutralized by the achievement of peace, bread and land, and trust that the rapid advancement of a socialist revolution in industrially advanced Germany would provide Russia with an economic and political ally, which would remedy the weakness and backwardness of Russia itself. At this stage, Germany was already a secret ally. Yeah, lady, this is chapter 24 from Quigley. Indeed. From 1917 to 1921, Russia passed through a period of almost incredible political and economic chaos, with counter-revolutionary movements and foreign interventionist forces appearing on all sides. The area under Bolshevik control was reduced at one time to little more than the central portions of European Russia. Within the country, there was extreme economic and social collapse. Industrial production was disorganized by the disruption of transportation, the inadequate supply of raw materials and credit, and the confusions arising from the war, so that there was an almost complete lack of such products as clothing, shoes, and agricultural tools. By 1920, industrial production in general was about 13% of the 1913 figure. At the same time, paper money was printed so freely to pay for the cost of war, civil war, and the operations of the government that prices rose rapidly and the ruble became almost worthless. The general index of prices was only 3 times the 1913 level in 1917, but rose to more than 16,000 times that level by the end of 1920. Unable to get either industrial products or sound money for their produce, the peasants planted only for their own needs and hoarded their surpluses. Acreage under crops was reduced by at least 1/3 in 1916 to 1920, while yields fell even more rapidly from 74 million tons of grain in 1916 to 30 million tons in 1919 and to less than 20 million tons in 1920. The decrease in 1920 resulted from drought. This became so much worse in 1921 that the crops failed completely. Loss of life in those 2 years of famine reached 5 million, although the American Relief Administration came into the country and fed as many as 10 million persons a day. That was in August 1922. In the course of this chaos and tragedy, the Bolshevik regime was able to survive, to crush counter-revolutionary movements, and to eliminate foreign interventionists. They were able to do this because their opponents were divided, indecisive, or neutralized, while they were vigorous, decisive, and completely ruthless. The chief sources of Bolshevik strength were to be found in the Red Army and the secret police, the neutrality of the peasants, and the support of the proletariat workers in the industry and transportation. The secret police, brackets open, Cheka or Keka, not sure, C-K-E-K-A, brackets close, was made up of fanatical and ruthless communists who systematically murdered all real or potential opponents. The Red Army was recruited from the old Tsarist army, but was rewarded by high pay and favorable food rations. Although the economic system collapsed almost completely and the peasants refused to supply or even produce food for the city population, the Bolsheviks established a system of food requisition from the peasants and distributed this food by a rationing system which rewarded their supporters. The murder of the imperial family by the Bolsheviks in July 1918 removed this possible nucleus for the counter-revolutionary forces, while the general refusal of these forces to accept the revolutionary distribution of agricultural lands kept the peasants neutral in spite of the Bolshevik grain requisitions. Moreover, the peasants were divided among themselves by the Bolshevik success in splitting them, so that the poorer peasants banded together to divert much of the burden of grain requisitions onto their more affluent neighbors. The most acute problems facing the revolutionary regime at the end of 1917 was the war with Germany. At first, the Bolsheviks tried to end the fighting without any formal peace, but the Germans continued to advance, and the Bolsheviks were compelled to sign the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, March 1918. By this treaty, Russia lost all the western borderlands, including Poland, the Ukraine, and the Baltic areas. The German forces tried, with little success, to obtain economic resources from Ukraine, and soon advanced far beyond the boundaries established at Brest-Litovsk to occupy the Don Valley, the Crimea, and the Caucasus. Crimea, right? Still in the news, right? In various parts of Russia, notably on the south and east, counter-revolutionary armies called Whites took the field to overthrow the Bolsheviks. The Cossacks of the Don under L.G. Kornilov, Anton Denikin, and Peter Wrangel occupied the Caucasus, the Crimea, and the Ukraine after the Germans withdrew from these areas. In Siberia, a conservative government under Admiral Alexander Kolchak was set up at Omsk and announced its intention to take over all of Russia. That's late 1918. A group of 40,000 armed Czechoslovaks who had deserted from the Habsburg armies to fight for Russia turned against the Bolsheviks and, while being evacuated to the east along the Trans-Siberian Railway, seized control of that route from the Volga to Vladivostok. This is in the summer of 1918. This is somebody in the chat put out some more information about this Cheka I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. From its founding, being the military and security arm of the Bolshevik communist government, the Cheka was instrumental in the Red Terror. In 1921, the troops for the Infernal Defense of the Republic, a branch of the Cheka, numbered at least 200,000. These troops policed labor camps, ran the Gulag system, conducted requisitions of food, subjected political opponents to torture and summary execution, and put down rebellions and riots by workers or peasants, and mutinies in the desertion-plagued Red Army. There you go. Various outside powers also interfered in the Russian chaos. An allied expeditionary force invaded northern Russia from Murmansk and Archangel. That's a city name, Archangel. While a force of Japanese and other Americans landed at Vladivostok and pushed westwards for hundreds of miles. The British seized the oil fields of the Caspian region. This is late 1918. While the French occupied parts of the Ukraine, about Odessa, March 1919. Odessa, another interesting name. Against these various forces, the Bolsheviks fought with growing success, using the new Red Army and the Cheka, supported by the nationalized industrial and agrarian systems. While these fought to preserve the revolutionary regime within Russia, various sympathizers were organized outside the country. The Third International was organized under Grigory Zinoviev to encourage revolutionary movements in other countries. That's interesting, right? That is called the Third International. Its only notable success was in Hungary, where a Bolshevik regime under Béla Kun was able to maintain itself for a few months. That's from March to August 1919. By 1920, Russia was in complete confusion. At this point, the new Polish government invaded Russia, occupying much of the Ukraine. What? That's amazing. I mean, the Polish war machine was like horses. They didn't really have an army, so that tells you how badly Russia must have, the state of Russia must have been. A Bolshevik counterattack drove the Poles back to Warsaw, where they called upon the Entente powers for assistance. General Weygand was sent with a military mission and supplies. Thus supported, Poland was able to re-invade Russia and impose the Treaty of Riga, March 1921. This treaty established the Polish-Russian boundary 150 miles east of the tentative Curzon line, which had been drawn along the ethnographic frontier by the Western powers in 1919. By this act, Poland took within its boundaries several millions of Ukrainians and White Russians and ensured a high level of Soviet-Polish enmity for the next 20 years. Much of the burden of this turmoil and conflict was imposed on the Russian peasantry by the agricultural requisition and the whole system of so-called war communism. As part of this system, not only were agricultural crops considered to be government property, but all private trade and commerce was also forbidden. The banks were nationalized, while all industrial plants of over 5 workers and all craft enterprises of over 10 workers were nationalized. This system of extreme communism was far from being a success, and peasant opposition steadily increased in spite of the severe punishment inflicted for violations of the regulations. As counter-revolutionary movement was suppressed and foreign interventionists gradually withdrew, Opposition to the system of political oppression and war communism increased. This culminated in peasant uprisings, urban riots, and the mutiny of the sailors at Kronstadt in March 1921. Within a week, a turning point was passed. The whole system of war communism and peasant requisitioning was abandoned in favor of a new economic policy of free commercial activity in agriculture and other commodities, with the re-establishment of the profit motive and of private ownership in small industries and in small land holdings. Requisitioning was replaced by a system of moderate taxation, and the pressure of the secret police, of censorship, and of the government generally were relaxed. As a result of these tactics, there was a dramatic increase in economic prosperity and in political stability. This improvement continued for 2 years until, by late 1923, political unrest and economic problems again became acute. How did that happen? At the same time, the approaching death of Lenin complicated these problems with a struggle for power among Lenin's successors. Because the political organization of the Bolshevik regime in its first few years was on trial and error basis, its chief outlines were not established until 1923. These outlines had two quite different aspects, the constitutional and the political. Constitutionally, the country was organized in 1922 into a union of socialist Soviet republics, the USSR. The number of these republics had changed greatly, rising from 4 in 1924 and 11 in the 1936-1940 period to 15 in the 1960s. Of these, the largest and most important was the Russian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic, which covered about 3/4 of the area of the whole Union with about 5/8 of the total population. The constitution of this Russian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic, drawn up in 1918, became the pattern for the governmental system in the other republics, as they were created and joined with the Russian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic to form the USSR. In this organization, local Soviets in cities and villages, organized on an occupational basis, elected representatives to district, county, regional and provincial congresses of Soviets. As we shall see in a moment, these numerous levels of indirect representation serve to weaken any popular influence at the top and to allow the various links in the chain to be controlled by the Communist political party. The city Soviets and the provincial congresses of Soviets sent representatives to an all-Russian Congress of Soviets, which possessed, in theory, full constitutional powers. Since this Congress of Soviets, with 1,000 members, met no more than once a year, it delegated its authority to an all-Russian Central Executive Committee of 300 members. This executive committee, meeting only 3 times a year, entrusted day-to-day administration to a council of people's commissars, or cabinet, of 17 persons. When the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics was formed in 1923 by adding other republics to the RSFSR, the new republic obtained a somewhat similar constitutional organization and a similar system was created for the whole Union. The latter possessed a Union Congress of Soviets, largely unwieldy, meeting infrequently and chosen by the city and provincial Soviets. This Union Congress elected an equally unwieldy all-Union Central Executive Committee consisting of 2 chambers. One of these chambers, the Council of the Union, represented population. The other chamber, the Council of Nationalities, represented the constituent republics and autonomous regions of the Soviet Union. The Council of People's Commissars of the RSFSR was transformed with slight changes into a Union Council of Commissars for the whole Union. This ministry had commissars for the 5 fields: foreign affairs, defense, foreign trade, communications, and post and telegraphs, from which the constituent republics were excluded, as well as numerous commissars for activities which were shared with the republics. This system had certain notable characteristics. There was no separation of powers, so that the various organs of the government could engage in legislative, executive, administrative, and, if necessary, judicial activities. Second, there was no constitution or constitutional law in the sense of a body of rules above or outside the government. Interesting. Since constitutional laws were made by the same process and had the same weight as other laws. Third, there was no guaranteed rights or liberties of individuals, since the accepted theory was that rights and obligations arise from and in the state, rather than outside or separate from the state. Interesting, right? The state, this is my comment here, the state is the people. If there were no people, there is no state. Last, there were no democratic or parliamentary elements because of the monopoly of political powers by the Communist Party. The Communist Party was organized in a system similar to and parallel to the state, except that it included only a small portion of the population. At the bottom, in every shop or neighborhood, were unions of party members called cells. Above these, rising level on level, were higher organizations consisting, on each level, of a party congress and an executive committee chosen by the congress of the same level. These were found in districts, counties, provinces, regions, and in the constituent republics. At the top was the Central Party Congress and the Central Executive Committee, chosen by it. As years went by, the Central Party Congress met more and more rarely and then merely approved the activities and resolutions of the Central Executive Committee. This committee and its parallel institutions in the state, Council of People's Commissars, were dominated until 1922 by the personality of Lenin. His eloquence, intellectual agility, and capacity for ruthless decision and practical improvisation gave him the paramount position in both party and state. In May 1922, Lenin had a cerebral stroke and, after a series of such strokes, died in January 1924. This long-drawn illness gave rise to a struggle for control of the party and the state apparatus within the party itself. This struggle at first took the form of a union of the lesser leaders against Trotsky, the second most important leader after Lenin. But eventually this developed into a struggle of Stalin against Trotsky and finally of Stalin against the rest. By 1927, Stalin had won a decisive victory over Trotsky and all opposition. Stalin's victory was due very largely to his ability to control the administrative machinery of the party behind the scenes and to the reluctance of his opponents, especially Trotsky, to engage in a showdown struggle with Stalin, lest this lead to civil war, foreign intervention, and the destruction of the revolutionary achievement. Thus, while Trotsky had the support of the Red Army and of the mass of party members, these were both neutralized by his refusal to use them against Stalin's control of the party machinery. Yeah, that sounds strange, right? Why did he not do that? I mean, is he your enemy or is he not? You know? The party, as we have said, remained a minority of the population under the theory that quality was more important than quantity. There were 23,000 members in March in 1917, 650,000 in October 21. At this latter date, a purge began, which reduced the party rolls by 24%. Subsequently, the rolls were reopened and membership rose to 3.4 million by 1940. The power to admit or to purge, held in the hands of the Central Executive Committee, completely centralized control of the party itself. The fact that there was only one legal party and that elections to positions in the state were by ballots containing only one party and even one name for each office, gave the party complete control of the state. Yeah. They call that voting, right? This control was neither weakened nor threatened by a new constitution or democratic appearance and form. Read that wrong. This control was neither weakened nor threatened by a new constitution of democratic appearance and form, which came into existence in 1936. In 1919, the Central Executive Committee of 19 appointed 2 subcommittees of 5 each and a secretariat of 3. One of the subcommittees, the Politburo, was concerned with questions of policy, while the other, the Orgbureau, was concerned with questions of party organization. Only one man, Stalin, was a member of both of these. In April 1922, a new secretariat of 3 was named: Stalin, Vyacheslav Molotov, and Valerian Kuibychev, with Stalin as Secretary General. From this central position, he was able to build up a party bureaucracy loyal to himself, purge those who would be most opposed to his plans, or transfer to remote positions those 2 party members whose loyalty to himself was not beyond question. At the death of Lenin in January 1924, Stalin was the most influential party member, but still lurked in the background. At first, he ruled as one of the triumvirate of Stalin, Grigory Zinoviev, and Lev Kamenev, all united in opposition to Trotsky. The last was removed from his position as War Commissioner in January 1925 and from the Politburo in October 1926. In 1927, at Stalin's behest, Trotsky and Zinoviev were expelled from the party. Zinoviev was later restored to membership, but in 1929 Trotsky was deported to exile in Turkey. By that time Stalin held the reins of government firmly in his own hands. So that ends the chapter. Took 45 minutes. I wanted to read that myself also, so we got two things. I'm gonna do this one, global governance. This is a preface. The United States National Intelligence Council and the European Union's Institute for Security Studies have joined forces to produce this assessment of the long-term prospects for global governance frameworks. This exercise builds on the experience of the two institutions in identifying the key trends shaping the future international system. Since the mid-1990s, the NIC, that's National Intelligence Council, has produced 4 editions of its landmark Global Trends report. The most recent one, Global Trends 2025, A Transformed World, published in late 2008, noted that momentous change was ahead, with the gap between increasing disorder and weakening governance structures widening. The EU ISS, that's the European Institute for Security Studies, produced the first EU-level report on the factors affecting the evolution of the international system in 2006. It was called The New Global Puzzle, What World for the EU in 2025. The report stressed that a multipolar system is emerging and that matching new distributions of power with new rules and institutions will be critical to preserving international peace and stability. The US and the EU do not always see eye to eye on every issue on the international agenda, but they share fundamental values and strategic interests to an extent not matched by any other partners in the world. I don't know if that's correct. It is stated here as such, but I know that China and other regions, other countries around there also are tied together in economic unities. So, and since China is rapidly becoming number one when it comes to production, they need to put that stuff somewhere, so they're looking for economic ties. Transatlantic agreement is no longer enough to effectively manage global challenges. So, transatlantic agreements, that's like United States and Europe making agreements, and that's how they want to manage global challenges. What the heck are these global challenges that they're talking about here? Doing so will require renewed efforts to address governance gaps and strengthen multilateralism in partnership with other pivotal centers of power and with the international community at large. This report provides an informal contribution to an important international debate on the way forward for global, regional and bilateral institutions and frameworks to meet emerging challenges. Again, these emerging challenges. This has nothing to do, I'm telling you right now, these challenges that they're talking about. This isn't about your well-being, alright? It is not meant as an exhaustive report card evaluation. It is not meant as an exhaustive report card evaluating the performance of individual institutions. While not being policy prescriptive, the report shares a strong belief, as exemplified by multilateralist approaches of the United States and the EU governments to resolving global problems, such as the recent financial crisis. The global challenges will require global solutions. This is indoctrination, guys. They want to destroy countries and destroy their sovereignty, like it has been done here in the European Union. So they're working on creating a more open global government. There is already a global government, except that it's more or less hidden, especially in the past. Nowadays it's becoming more and more clear, but there are still countries that have borders, for instance, right? Like the Netherlands doesn't have any borders anymore, right? That's the goal for every country in the world, you see? Gone are your borders. The Netherlands used to have their own currency. Poof, gone. You see? And so this report is just trying to fill your mind with globalist ideas. Okay, so keep that in mind. The report does not seek to examine all the various challenges likely to require multilateralist efforts, but rather highlights several important governance gaps. Right? There's people, I don't know who's writing this, but they seem to think that there are governance gaps, right? It's worse than government. Governance is worse than government, guys. We therefore do not go into depth on proliferation or cybersecurity, which we believe are receiving greater attention. Instead, we focus on such issues as intrastate conflict, resource management. They're talking about you guys. When they say resource management, that's you. Migration and biotechnology. Although recognized by many as ongoing challenges, we believe the long-term impact of these issues on the strength of the international order has not been fully appreciated. Yeah? See that? International order. Global Governance 2025 is the result of an inclusive process enriched by wide-ranging consultations with government officials as well as business, academic, NGO, new non-governmental organizations, think tank leaders, right? Think of Committee of 300, Council on Foreign Relations, Royal Institute of International Affairs, those self-appointed leaders of society. And media representatives. See, they need the media in here as well. You know why, right? Media representatives in Brazil, China, India, Japan, Russia, South Africa, and in the Gulf region. The diversity of the comments and insights, which we have included in the body of the text, testifies both to the richness of the debate and to the difficulty of reconciling different interests and standpoints when reforming global governance. Yeah. It's as if all these media representatives in Brazil, China, India, they all want global governance. It's just that they want it in some different way or something. That's how it's trying to come across, right? A number of experts, acknowledged elsewhere, like we will get their name, hopefully. A number of experts, acknowledged elsewhere, have contributed to the success of this project and to the high quality of this report. The Atlantic Council of the United States and the Transatlantic Policy Network have been partners in supporting the project. And I see Councillor Matthew Burrows and Giovanni Grevi from the European side have steered this process and took charge of drafting the bulk of the report. Their work has set an excellent example of cooperation in delivering joint analysis and achieving a largely shared perspective. Yeah, these people, they may come from the United States or Europe, but they do not represent the country that they come from, you see. They're working for a global union. The Global Governance 2025 project is innovative in many respects. This is the first time the NIC has jointly developed and produced an unclassified report with non-US body. Yeah. This tells you that they have classified report also, you see. It's a giveaway, isn't it? Global Governance 2025 provides an important step with a view to future joint projects on matters of common interest. Alright, executive summary. Global governance, the collective management of common problems at the international level, is at a critical juncture. Although global governance institutions have racked up many successes since their development after the Second World War, the growing number of issues on this international agenda and their complexity is outpacing the ability of international organizations and national governments to cope. Nowadays they dare say that, right? They dare mention that they were developed after the Second World War. You know, in the days in 1960s, 1970s, they didn't talk about that stuff, not openly, because there was still a lot of memory in the people's heads about Germany, you see. They also wanted a European Union, remember? But because Germany had a bad name, they didn't mention that they were going to dissolve all the borders, you know? Nowadays they come out and say it, because people don't recognize it anymore. With the emergence of rapid globalization, the risks to the international system have grown to the extent that formerly localized threats are no longer locally containable, but are now potentially dangerous to global security and stability. Yeah. See, that's how they're trying to make you feel responsible for what's going on in the world. Well, that's ridiculous, isn't it? You know, locally something goes wrong, and all of a sudden the whole world is in danger. Right. At the beginning of the century, threats such as ethnic conflicts, infectious diseases, and terrorism terrorism. Yeah. I don't remember the name now, but I'm so bad with names, guys. I'm telling you, the Gladio. Yeah, the Gladio. That, type that into Google and see what you find about terrorism. Operation Gladio. Alright? It's on purpose. It's governmental terrorism. Has nothing to do with a few people going crazy. This is governmental organized terrorism. Look it up, Operation Gladio. Infectious diseases and terrorism, as well as a new generation of global challenges, including climate change. Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? That's a real problem. The climate is changing. Yeah. It has been changing even before mankind was on the earth, you know? Yeah, ridiculous. Like they want to tell you, well, the climate has to stay the same, otherwise we're going to get into trouble. Yeah. Like they have the power to do that? Get out of here. They don't. We're way too insignificant on a global scale to be able to decide what the climate is going to be like. Energy security, for food and water scarcity. Yeah, right. We're looking at food and water scarcity, right? With all the technology that we have, we still have food and water scarcity? You freaking kidding me? It's unbelievable. International migration flows and new technologies are increasingly taking center stage. Yeah. How dare they put this in one sentence, right? New technologies and food and water scarcity. 3 effects of rapid globalization are driving demands for more effective global governments. Really? Who's demanding that? Have you heard anybody speak about, oh, we need to have more global governments in your neighborhood? It's only those people that are working for the agenda that are spouting this nonsense about global governance, you see? They have a demand for it, not the normal people. Interdependence has been a feature of economic globalization for many years. Yeah, right. They don't want you to be independent. No. You have to be interdependent now. You see? But the rise of China, India, Brazil, and other fast-growing economies has taken economic interdependence to a new level. These guys, I mean, is it my English that is so bad? Or is it possible to write this in 2 ways? It says here, the rise of China, India, Brazil, and other fast-growing economies has taken. Oh, it's the rise, that's singular. Alright, I'm thinking it's like plural, right? It should be have, but it's probably the rise that is single, and the rise has taken an economic interdependence to a new level. Yeah. Here in the Netherlands also, the Dutch government has made agreements with China that they're gonna buy their crap, right? And just today I was looking at the headlines from the local newspaper here, the Gelderlander, and guess what it says? Big letters, headlines. More and more factories disappearing. Yeah, no kidding, right? And who do we blame for that? Those puppets in Den Haag who have made all kinds of agreements with crap making China. I mean, it used to be our enemy, right? How did they change from being our enemy to our most favored economic nation? It's outrageous. You know, it's not like China has westernized so much that they should be our friends. It's ridiculous. I don't want to live in China, you know. It's awful there. It really is. So that's also how you can see that the governments are puppets. Local governments here in Europe. They're puppets. They don't really have power. They're working for a global agenda. Not for the country that they are based in. Otherwise they would have cut these ties with these communistic regimes like China. Destroying our own country. The multiple links among the climate change and resources issues, the economic crisis, and state fragility, hubs of risks for the future, illustrate the interconnected nature of challenges on the international agenda today. Yeah, more rubbish from these people. Trying to make you think that the world is one and there is no other option. If you have a problem, the whole world has a problem. That's what they're trying to tell you here. Ridiculous. Trying to make you responsible for how the whole world is functioning. Right? It's perfectly doable for a country like the Netherlands to function on its own without the help of anybody. We've got food, we've got water, we've got sunshine, we've got it. We've got the people that want to work. I mean, the work ethic here is awesome. People want to go to work. As opposed to some other countries, which I can imagine that you don't want to work there because the conditions are so horrible. But you have to work, like in India, for instance. They get paid cents per day, you know. They have to work in chemical shit that gives them cancer, and so on and so on. We don't have that crap here in the Netherlands. We can function on our own perfectly. We don't need all of you, the rest of the world. Many of the issues cited above involve interwoven domestic and foreign challenges. What domestic challenges are you talking about? We don't have any domestic challenges except for the fact that this government is working for a global agenda. That's our domestic challenge. Another domestic challenge we have is that they kill our political leaders that might want to try to do good, like Pim Fortuyn. They get assassinated by, quote-unquote, a lone nut. Where have you heard that before? Right? Domestic politics creates tight constraints on international cooperation and reduces the scope for compromise. And excuse me? It's the other way around. Domestic politics, they don't get to decide anymore. If we want to make a law, we have to check with the European Union first if we are überhaupt allowed to make this law. It's ridiculous. The shift to a multipolar world is complicating the prospects for effective global governance over the next 10 years. Well, I hope you fail completely. The expanding economic clout of emerging powers increases their political influence well beyond their borders. Power is not only shifting from established powers to rising countries and, to some extent, the developing world. but also toward non-state actors. Diverse perspectives and suspicions about global governance, which is seen as a Western concept, will add to the difficulties of effectively mastering the growing number of challenges. Yeah. Again, they say so many times, well, we've got challenges here, challenges there, growing number of challenges. What they mean is that they can't get their world order together. That's the challenge that they are talking about. It's not that people have problem. No, they have problem. Making a one world government. That's the challenge that they're talking about. It's not about the well-being of people. Here's some points. Brazilians feel that there is a need for redistribution of power from developed to developing states. Really? Do they really? How do you know that? Who did you ask about that? Some experts here appeal to authority here, because it says only some experts. We consulted saw Brazil tending to like state-centered multilateralism. Sure, these experts are probably on the payroll of these globalists people. They don't even want to get their name mentioned. It's just some experts. That's an appeal to authority. You might as well throw that in the garbage. We don't know how Brazilians feel. Next point. Many of our Chinese interlocutors see mounting global challenges and fundamental defects in the international system, but emphasize the need for China to deal with its internal problems. The Chinese envisage, it's almost French, envisage, but it's from French, that word, visage, visual, you see. The Chinese envisage a bigger structure, even bigger structure, right? Pulling together the various institutions and groups that have been established recently. How do you know that the Chinese envisage that? Have you ever asked any Chinese on the street about this? They see the G20 as being a step forward, but question whether north-south differences will impede cooperation on issues other than economics. Yeah, really. The average Chinese person sees the G20 as being a step forward. Seriously? Do you think they really care about that? Next point. For participants from the Persian Gulf region, the question of what sort of global institutions are most capable of inclusive power sharing. See? That's what I said in the beginning, right? They're getting all kinds of spokespersons from every region that says, well, we have to have this kind of global institution or that kind of global institution. It's rubbish. It's like a bird, you know? It has two wings, but it's going one way. It's going to global governance. They bemoaned the lack of strong regional organizations. The Indians thought existing international organizations are grossly inadequate and worried about an absence of internal equilibrium in Asia to ensure stability. So now they know how Indians think as well. They tend to have a good idea about how people think, don't they? Did they even interview one of these people? Did they ever come to you, asking you about how you think about global governance? they felt that India is not well positioned to help the develop regional institutions for Asia, given China's preponderant role in the region. Yeah. Russian experts we consulted, again, appeal to authority. Which Russian experts are you talking about? Russian experts we consulted see the world in 2025 as still one of great powers, but with more opportunities for transnational cooperation. The Russians worried about the relative lack of trans-Pacific security. The United States, Europe and Russia also have scope for growing much closer, while China, with the biggest economy, will be the main factor in changing the world. Really? The South Africans assessed that globalization appears to be strengthening regionalization as opposed to creating a single global polity. Yeah. You ask the average South African about this. Do you know what a single global polity is? What do you think they're gonna say, right? Yet these numbnuts, they will tell you that South Africans have an idea about single global polity. Seriously? They worry that the losers from globalization increasingly outnumber the winners. Yeah. There are no winners in this. There are only losers. And that's you and me and everybody else. All the normal people. All losers. In addition to the shift to a multipolar world, power is also shifting towards non-state actors, be they agents or spoilers of cooperation. On a positive note, transnational non-governmental organizations, civil society groups, churches and faith-based organizations, multinational corporations and other bodies and interest groups have been equally, if not more effective than states at reframing issues and mobilizing publics, a trend we expect to continue. So I don't get this sentence at all. What do you mean, a positive note? On a positive note, non-governmental organizations, civil society groups, churches and faith-based organizations, multinational corporations, and so on, have been equally, if not more effective than states at reframing issues and mobilizing publics. A trend we expect to continue. I really don't get this. What's happening is that our paper, the Gelderlander here says, factories are closing down. Right? The sentence below that was, will lower educated people ever have a job? That's what it said. News, headlines. You know, and you're talking about multinational corporations? What they are doing is going to the countries where they can get cheap labor. And that's not here in the Netherlands. There are no winners here. These big corporations that move their operations to countries where they have cheap labor, the cheap labor is getting treated like slaves. They have very bad working conditions, right? So they're not getting better. They would be better off if they had their own country working at their own economic situation. And it's not so hard to do. I mean, the technology is there. right? All they have to do is copy it, like Japan did, you know? These people, the people there are just as intelligent as the people here. You know, they can do it. They're not allowed to do it. They're being suppressed. However, hostile non-state actors, such as criminal organizations and terrorist networks, that's a nice one, isn't it? You mean like the CIA as a criminal organization? And terrorist networks, you mean like the government? You know? All empowered by existing and new technologies. Yeah. Like they did it from a laptop in a cave, remember? They're new technologies. You got to be kidding me, right? Can pose serious security threats and compound systemic risks. Many developing countries, which are likely to play an increasing role at the regional and global level, also suffer from a relative paucity, what the hell is that, of non-state actors that could help newly emerging states and their governments deal with the growing transnational challenges. Global governance institutions have adapted some degree as new issues have emerged, but the adaptations have not necessarily been intentional or substantial enough to keep up with the growing demands. Not intentional enough. See, they got problems. Rather, they have been spurred as much by outside forces as by the institutions themselves. Take care, lady. The emergence of informal groupings of leading countries such as the G20, the prospects for further regional corporations, notably in East Asia, see, they're grouping together as well, which they should, you know. If you want to be a bloc against United States and Europe, you better work together. And the multiple contributions of non-state actors to international corporations, although highly successful, are unlikely to serve as a permanent alternative to rule-based, inclusive, multilateral institutions. Multilateral institutions can deliver public goods that summits, non-state actors and regional frameworks cannot supply. No. You don't supply anything, these multilateral institutions. It's people that supply public goods, that can deliver public goods, not the institutions. They can only bureaucratize it and stuff. Or steal from you, you know? Our foreign interlocutors stress the need for decisions enjoying universal legitimacy. Universal even. Norms setting predictable patterns of behavior based on reciprocity and mutually agreed instruments to resolve disputes and redress torts, such as in trade matters. Norms setting predictable patterns of behavior. That's what stands out here to me. We assess that the multiple and diverse governance frameworks, however flexible, probably are not going to be sufficient to keep pace with the looming number of transnational and global challenges, absent extensive institutional reforms and innovations. Yeah, this reminds me of what's it called again? Agenda for a New American Century, I believe it's called. You know, they were also talking about problems unless, you know, we have a catalyzing event. Remember that? So, be very wary when they say things like this, you know? We assess that the multiple and diverse governance frameworks, however flexible, probably are not going to be sufficient, you see? That's the same as the United States not going to be able to keep their leading role, remember? To keep pace with a looming number of transnational and global challenges, absent extensive institutional reforms and innovations. That's what's coming, guys. That's what they're saying here. We're going to have extensive institutional reforms and innovations. Whatever these innovations mean. The capacities of the current institutional patchwork will be stretched by the type of problems facing the global order over the next few decades. See? How they're trying to make you think that there is a global order which has problems. And now you have to pay for it. You see? Numerous studies indicate what studies? Numerous studies indicate the growing fragility of many low-income developing states and potential for more conflict, particularly in cases where civil wars were never fully resolved. Yeah. Well, that's not your problem, is it? I'm talking to these globalists now. If people have a civil war, what's it to you? Do you live there? You have a problem? Let these people fight it out. You know? Then we might have some peace. But no, now civil war is a global problem. You're not allowed to resolve your problems yourself. No, the global governance is gonna come in and help you resolve the problems of your civil war. It's like me and my neighbor having a conflict, and then somebody else comes in who has no ties to us and is going to solve the problem for us. No. We can solve it ourselves. We're reasonable people. We can do this. We don't need you. Internal conflict or collapse of large populous states on the scale of an Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Pakistan or Nigeria would likely overwhelm international conflict management efforts. Yeah. See? These international conflict management efforts, they are trying to get into everybody's nose, into everybody's face. Afghanistan with approximately, like how we are helping them, right? Flying over Afghanistan with military planes. Yeah, that's really helping. That's gonna solve the problem, right? Afghanistan with approximately 28 million people and Iraq with 30 million are among the most populous conflict management cases ever attempted. And they are proving difficult. No. This has nothing to do with Afghanistan or Iraq having a problem. This is Western interventionism, which caused the problem in the first place. Regional organizations have performed comparatively few large-scale operations responses. No, I read this wrong. Regional organizations have performed comparatively few large-scale operational responses to fragile states requiring humanitarian and peacemaking help. Yeah. Although we can expect increased political and economic engagement from rising powers, in part a reflection of their increasing global interests, emerging powers have deep-seated concerns about the consequences of the proactive management of state fragility. Prevention, for example, often can require direct political intervention or even the threat or use of military force as a last resort. Efforts to prevent conflicts have often been slowed by reluctance and resistance to intervene directly, potentially overriding another country's sovereignty. Yeah, like they really care about your sovereignty. Many experts in emerging states thought their governments probably would be particularly leery of any intervention if it's driven by the West. Another cluster of problems: the management of energy, food and water resources appears particularly unlikely to be effectively tackled without major governance innovations. See? How they want to globally decide how your country is going to manage their food, manage their water, manage their energy. See, you don't have a say about that. That's going to be globalized. Individual international agencies respond to discrete cases, particularly humanitarian emergencies in individual countries. However, no overall framework exists to manage the interrelated problems of food, water and energy. See, now they're telling you, oh, we have a problem. There's no overall framework to manage problems of food, water and energy. Therefore, we have to take yours. You see? The stakes are high in view of the impact that growing scarcities could have in undermining to the open... No, I read this wrong again. The stakes are high in view of the impact that growing scarcities could have on undermining the open international system. Yeah. Growing scarcities, right? It's ridiculous. We wouldn't have any scarcities if they would just leave the people alone. We have so much technological advancement, and there's so much know-how on how to make food, for instance, especially here in the Netherlands, that we, here in the Netherlands, we could make food for the whole of Europe. You know, and they're talking about scarcities. We could make food. I'm not saying that we do. You know, there's whole fields of flowers. Well, that's useful, right? Instead that there's food made there. No. They make flowers. Useless flowers. They should be growing food there. That's what the earth is for. It's for creating food. If you want to have flowers, go into the woods, find some flowers there. There's a lot of woods here also. More than 50% of our country is wood. You know, it's just bushes. And there's all kinds of fruits there in the bushes as well that you can eat. Right? But no, we have to manage that land and then grow flowers. Are you kidding me? We should make food there. There would be no scarcity. And we don't have scarcity here, by the way. But there would be no scarcity anywhere in Europe if they let us make food for them. We could trade that for other stuff, you know? Resource competition in which major powers seek to secure reliable supplies could lead to a breakdown in cooperation in other areas. Moreover, scarcities are likely to hit poor states the hardest. leading in the worst case to internal or interstate conflict and spillover to regional destabilization. Okay, how do I know that our little country, the Netherlands, can supply the whole of Europe with food? It's because I asked the farmer. You know, this is not me. I'm not a farmer. This is the farmer speaking. You know? Other over-the-horizon issues, migration, the potential opening of the Arctic. Yeah, right. And risks associated with the biotechnology revolution. Yeah, that's a problem. Biotechnology, that is a problem. That might go very, very far, this biotechnology stuff. It's dangerous for humans. Are likely to rise in importance and demand a higher level of cooperation. These issues are difficult ones for multilateral cooperation because they involve more preventive action. Under current circumstances, greater cooperation on those issues in which the risks are not clear-cut will be especially difficult to achieve. See, they're mentioning, oh, we got problems with this, we got problems with that. Poor globalist. Throughout the main potential scenarios is the next heading. Throughout the main text, we have sprinkled fictionalized scenarios that could result if we believe likely the multiple and diverse government frameworks struggle to keep pace with the looming number of transnational and global challenges. Look, they are talking here about fictionalized scenarios. Yeah? You think really that's what these people waste their time on fiction? They're not wasting their time on fiction, people. They know exactly what they're doing. They're planning the future. There's nothing fiction about it. The scenarios illustrate various permutations that could happen over the next 15 years. See? You might as well read, the scenarios illustrate various permutations that will happen over the next 15 years. The following summarizes what we see as the principal potential trajectories of the international system as it tries to confront new challenges. Yeah, right. As it tries, the international system tries. No. These are people that plan out the economic future. And they know exactly what they're doing. They don't make mistakes, people. They're not trying, they're doing. And it's not the international system that is trying, it's people. We believe the risks of an unreformed global governance systems, the risks of an unreformed global governance system are likely to accumulate over time. Crisis, so long as they are not overwhelming, may actually spur greater innovation and change in the system. Yeah, that's what crises are for, haven't you noticed? Inaction over the long term increases the risk of a complete breakdown. Scenario 1. Barely keeping afloat. In this scenario, seen as the most likely one over the next several years, no one crisis will be so overwhelming as to threaten the international system, even though collective management advances slowly. Crises are dealt with ad hoc, and temporary frameworks or institutions are devised to avert the most threatening aspects of them. Yeah, like a framework or an institution is going to have any effect. Right? It's people that have effects. not frameworks or institutions. They're just made to give you the idea that there's being worked on the problem. Yeah, but these institutions are backed by the same people that create the problem. You know, they want your life institutionalized. Formal institutions remain largely unreformed, and Western states probably must shoulder a disproportionate share of global governance as developing countries prevent disruption at home. This future is not sustainable over the long term, as it depends on no crisis being so unmanageable as to overwhelm the international system. Scenario 2. Fragmentation. Powerful states and regions try to wall themselves off from outside threats. Asia builds a regional order that is economically self-sufficient. That is what is going on. This is no scenario. This is no fiction. Global communications ensure globalization does not die, but it slows significantly. Europe turns its focus inward as it wrestles with growing discontent with declining living standards. Yeah, that again is not fiction. It's happening now. With a growing workforce, the United States might be in a better position, but may still be fiscally constrained if its budgetary shortfalls and long-term debt problems remain unresolved. Again, not fiction. Scenario 3. Concert of Europe redux. Under this scenario, severe threats to the international system, possibly a looming environmental disaster, yeah, the weather is gonna cause the world to break down, right? Or a conflict that risks spreading, prompt greater cooperation on solving global problems. Yeah. Is that why they're spraying the skies? To create these problems so that they can step in and solve them for you? Significant reforms of the international system becomes possible, although less likely than the two first scenarios in the immediate future. Such a scenario might prove to be the best outcome over the long term. Building a resilient international system that would step up the level of overall cooperation on an array of problems. The United States increasingly shares power, while China and India increase their burden sharing, and the European Union takes a bigger global role. A stable concert could also occur incrementally over a long period in which economic gaps shrink and per capita income converges. Yeah. In which economic gaps shrink means you and me, the Western world, is gonna go down. That's what it means. Scenario 4. Gaming reality. Conflict trumps cooperation. This scenario is among the least likely, but the possibility cannot be dismissed. The international system becomes threatening owing to domestic disruptions, particularly in emerging powers such as China. Nationalistic pressures built as middle-class aspirations for the good life are stymied. What the heck is that? S-T-Y-M-I-E-D. Tensions build between the United States and China, but also among some of the BRICS, as competition grows for secure resource and clients. A nuclear arms race in the Middle East could deal an equally destabilizing blow to prospects for continued global growth. Suspicions and tensions make reforming global institutions impossible. Budding regional efforts, particularly in Asia, are also undermined. All right, that was just the start of it. Now they're coming with context, preface, executive summary, introduction. Chapter 1 is expanding agenda stretching institutional capacities. Chapter 2, power shifts complicating global governance. That's ridiculous. That's rubbish. You know, power shifts complicating global governance. Now it's working for it. Chapter 3, some success in adapting. Chapter 4, an uncertain future. Yeah, there's no such thing as an uncertain future, people. They know exactly what they're doing and they're planning the future, like they have been. Conclusion, future opportunities but also limits. See, especially that but also limits. You know, it's telling you that you're not going to be able to live a life that you used to. You're going to go down, you see. And then an axis, A to F. A, worldviews of global governance. Worldviews of global governance? What do they mean with that? B, the prospects for regionalism. Yeah, we're going to be divided into regions, people. Countries will no longer exist. C, the Arctic, challenge or opportunity for global governance. Yeah, they want everything, don't they? D, are global governance tools sufficient for fragile states? E, migration of the age of uncertainty. E, migration in the age of uncertainty. They're trying to make you think like they don't know what they're doing. They're trying to make you think that, oh, these problems are going to arise because we don't know what we're doing. There's all kinds of uncertainty. Rubbish. They create the problems so that they can step in and solve them for you. F, threats from biotechnology. Alright. Next heading is acknowledgements. In preparing this work, the National Intelligence Council and the European Union's Institute for Security Studies received immeasurable and critical help from an array of think tanks, consulting firms, academic and governmental institutions, literally scores of individual experts on all 5 continents. We would first like to thank the Atlantic Council of the US, that's the ACUS, and the Transatlantic Policy Network, that's the TPN, who were both partners in supporting this project. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. ACUS's Dr. Banning Garrett and Mr. Patrick Degatechno were superb in arranging the numerous overseas meetings. That's ridiculous, isn't it? They arrange these meetings, and now they get their names put in this paper because they can manage to get some people together? Are you kidding me? That's not what it's about, people. That's not why they get their names mentioned. It's because they are influential people. That's why their name is here. It's because these are the people that are planning your future. That's why their name is in here. ACUS President Frederik Kempe, that sounds Dutch, and Vice President Van Burwel, also participated in the planning and discussions in several venues. Mr. James Ellis, member of the European Parliament and head of TPN, was pivotal in helping to design the project and orchestrating key discussions in several capitals. See? That's why his name is in there. He orchestrates key discussions in several capitals. He's the one that's telling you, this is how it's going to go, people. You see? He accompanied us on almost all the trips. Dr. William Burke White of the State Department Policy Planning Office provided guidance and substantive advice in addition to accompanying us on all the trips. Ms. Rosemary Opachik, something like that, administrator of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and the European Parliament, also provided important contributions and participated in the most of the research trips. Didn't I mention the CFR before, guys? Now you see it. Mrs. Rosemary Opachik, OPACIC, administrator of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. That's not the CFR. They probably know each other, though. Yeah. Committee of Foreign Affairs. Let me see if we can... doesn't let me select it. Alright. Copy. Let's see what that is. Who are they affiliated with? The European Parliament. Foreignaffairs.house.gov. Welcome to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. See? Open this. This is foreignaffairs.house.gov. It's a governmental website. Subcommittees on Europe, Eurasia. That's a 1984 term. Okay, let's see about and contact, live video, news, press releases. Let's see about committee oversight plan. What is that? Introduction, January 15, 2013. Committee on Foreign Affairs Oversight Plan. Priority oversight matters. 2. Iran. The committee will continue to closely review U.S. policy to address the comprehensive threat posed by Iran to the United States. Yeah, that's like Iraq made such a threat to the United States, right? Iran is by no means a threat to the United States. They would be stupid to threaten the United States. They don't do that. They're not stupid. Alright? Comprehensive threat posed by Iran to the United States. Yeah, like the big brother is really afraid of Iran. And to its interests and allies, including but not limited to Iran's ongoing effort and to develop and acquire nuclear weapons capabilities. Really? Where's the proof of that? It's unconventional weapons and ballistic missile development. So they're really worried about Iran having guns. It's state sponsorship of terrorism. Yeah, like the United States doesn't do that, right? The United States has nothing to do with what happened on 9/11, right? And its effort to exert and expand its destabilization influence and operational capabilities in the Middle East, Europe, Asia, Africa. What? And the Western Hemisphere. This Iran is made out to be a big bully guy here, isn't it? They don't have that power, guys. The committee will also review political and economic support given Iran by other countries that is counter to US interests. Yeah. Of particular focus will be US efforts to fully implement all sanctions with respect to Iran under US law, including human rights sanctions, as well as the status and enforcement of multilateral sanctions against Iran. This reminds me of that quote-unquote woman who was asked about the millions of deaths in Iraq caused by sanctions and if it was worth it. And she said, sure, it was worth it. All those children, who cares, you know? That's the kind of people that are ruling this world, guys. Nutcases. About Afghanistan. The committee will comprehensively review US policy toward Afghanistan, including the development and implementation of the strategic partnership agreement between the United States and Afghanistan. The effectiveness of US assistance programs, like the Netherlands is doing, flying over there with military airplanes. Yeah, that's really helping the Afghani people, isn't it? The broader political, military and associated counterinsurgents and counterterrorism strategies. You mean like in the past, with the Mujahideen? And the full range of policies related to the 2014 transition, including programs and budget processes. They have more here. They want a mess in Pakistan, Middle East and North Africa, North Korea. They're talking about international terrorism and transnational organized crime. Transnational organized crime. The committee will examine the current status of Al-Qaeda. Oh, that's what I just mentioned, didn't I? Alright? In case you didn't know, the Mujahideen were backed by the United States. And so now it became Al-Qaeda, and now it's a problem. So you see, they create the problem and then try to implement rules and take away your rights because of Al-Qaeda, you see. With specific focus on recruitment efforts and evolving safe havens and efforts to obtain weapons of mass destruction. The committee will conduct oversight of the State Department's various counterterrorism programs. The committee will also examine the growing links between organized crime, illicit drugs, oh you mean the CIA, and global terrorism. Other transnational criminal issues of interest include maritime piracy, human, arms, and wildlife trafficking, money laundering and intellectual property piracy issues. Oh my god. Furthermore, they're talking about State Department oversight. This is the foreign affairs, guys. Asia Pacific region, US international broadcasting, they're talking about China. The committee will examine China's role in the Asia Pacific region and beyond. Particular focus will be placed on China's assertiveness in territorial dispute, rapid military modernization, and human rights abuses. So, now you're saying there's human rights abuses, but you buy all the stuff from them, don't ya? And that's the thing coming in, and so that means it's the end of my time. Thanks a lot for coming, everybody. Take care. See you guys next week.
How dare you?
To create so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a